Hello and welcome back everybody. This is of course your favorite Shogun here, Sugi, and today I'm gonna be reviewing Kengan Ashura Season 2, or as some people call it, Season 3, given to the fact that Netflix basically decided to break down Season 1 into Part 1 and Part 2. And we also have to talk about the fact that we have been waiting for 4 years for this series to continue because Part 2 of Season 1 aired on 2019 October, and I'm actually amazed how long has it basically been of this waiting. And obviously we got the COVID, which was one of the reasons for the delays, but even if that didn't happen, I still think that we waited for a considerable amount of time. And when this happens, and I did talk about this on a couple of other earlier reviews that I've done on the channel, is that the hype can die really easily if a show is on a break for a very long time, if there's no like an ongoing manga or a spin-off or OVAs or things like that, and that's problematic in a lot of ways in my opinion. But I kind of decided that, hey, I'm going to be watching the part 2 again. So I did a bit of a recapping and, basically got up to speed what basically went down and what were the fights and etc. And it also gave me a bit of a perspective to basically compare the quality of part 2 versus season 2. Now, enough about basically that. So let's talk about kind of what is this season about. And yeah, there will be some spoilers here, just so you know. So basically there's a lot of flashbacks, and yeah, there were flashbacks in part 2 and part 1, but I think there's specifically quite a lot of them, so almost every character that's going to be fighting during this season are going to be getting a bit of a flashback arc. You get to know about a bit of their backstory, and that kind of makes a lot of these fights important in the first place. Like, it's kind of like celebrity boxing, the things that we have going on, like Dylan versus Logan Paul, which is coming up in a couple of days. I'm not into boxing, but the story, the narrative, the drama, that's kind of like what really pulls in the normal people who are not necessarily in for it for the art of the sport. So when you have usually like a very interesting characters behind the fights, that makes it interesting to see who's going to be winning that specific fight. And I think that's kind of like one of the things that shows like Kengan Ashura and Bucky have done really well, is that they have fleshed out the characters, not just about the cool martial arts and techniques that they are using. There are actual characters behind them who have personalities, and they have background stories, which are probably usually, most of the time, and at least in case of Kengan, source of their motivation of why they're fighting. So you kind of like explain the reasons why they are doing XYZ. Now, also, I do want to say that one of the things, in this season, especially in part 2, was the Kazuo story. And Kazuo, in my point of view, he is kind of like the main character here, because the world of the Kengan matches and everything is kind of explored through his eyes. Like, you get to see, like, he's a newcomer into the space. He doesn't know much about fighting. In this season, he's not as much in the audience watching the fights. I mean, he's obviously on the important ones, but he's not basically there all the time seeing what's basically going down. And that's because Ohma will be getting hospitalized, and they will be Ohma will be out actually quite a lot throughout this season. So he's kind of like out of commission, is not around, and Kazuo is kind of with him. So they are actually sidelined a bit in this season, and they're not actually in such much of a focus throughout the latter half of this season. And this season, by the way, is 12 episodes. And that's like always good to see. I think I said this before. I said this on the Bucky reviews as well, and any other like a fighting style show, is that when you do tournament arcs, when you do fighting-based shows in general, it's going to be extremely boring if there's just only one fighter that you're going to be like inspecting and going through. In Kengan, as in Baki, you are going through the fights through other people's perspectives, and in some fights, like even like thought, like there's no way that this is going to be the outcome of the fight, and there's always like these. You kind of like feel like some people are like destined to fight at the end of the tournament, but I don't have that type of a feeling actually throughout like when I've been watching Kengan. So I think there's a lot of like unpredictability in this season specifically. There were a couple of twists which kind of like caught me off guard. I didn't think that those are going to be basically the outcomes of those fights. So I think that's one of the good things that this season has really also done, is that there is that element of surprise there. And this is just my like broader point of view. It's like it's going to be really boring to watch like a Dragon Ball tournament because you know it's Goku is going to be there at the end or whatever. Well, obviously that's not the case with Super, but what I'm saying is basically you had the predictability who is going to be at the end, there at the top. Now, in terms of the animation, I still think it's pretty much the same, but I feel like at least at the start of this season, we are seeing a bit more 2D than in Constant of 3D. And that's why reason the Kengan wasn't really received that well was that it was very 3D looking. And I have to say, like, the part 1 of this anime in season 1 was kind of rough at times. And I don't think there was really that bad moments actually in season 2 now as it was maybe on the previous parts. Like there's one maybe goofy scene where the animation's looking like kind of weird, and this looks kind of like, I don't want to say amateur, but it's just like the movements don't feel very natural. But most of the time you're going to be watching these fighting scenes and how like objects mesh together. I don't know what animation program they're using. It's not Unreal Engine at least, or Unity, but it's looking pretty good. I mean, they're convincing. Obviously, aesthetically, it's not for everybody. That's already like we've gone through this discussion a million times. A lot of people in this scene hate fucking 3D out of their bones, and that's their opinion. I don't really care about it, but I think animation was good. It has been better. I wish there was a bit more 2D. I don't think that every character has to be drawn in 3D. I don't think that's like a smart way to do it. But maybe it's cheaper. Maybe it's faster to do it that way. I don't know if they're going to be doing these. Because in Hollywood, for example, I think they use a lot more like, I don't remember. They go in the green screen and they put the suits on, and those characters are choreographed through the Unreal Engine to basically match the movements. But I don't think that they do this at all in Japan. I think they just animate everything, and that's basically what is the difference in quality in terms of like that kind of clunky style that we are seeing in these animes quite a lot. In terms of the openings and the endings in the soundtrack, I was not really that big of a fan of them. I listened to them for a couple of times. I always try to do that. A lot of people skip them, but I know there's that skipping functionality in Netflix, but I thought it was like okay, nothing like too special. And I think I am, basically hold that opinion throughout the whole series. I don't find it really, really great. Now, just kind of like finalizing my thoughts about here, I think overall it's pretty good season. We get to see a bit of almost flashbacks. We get to know a bit more about him because he was kind of like shrouded in shadows a bit, and so is his rival basically. And we get to see a bit more like Nico, and we get to see a bit of like the training arcs, and I think that all of that was like pretty decent and pretty nice. And we get to know a lot more. As I already said, there were a lot more flashbacks this season. At least it felt like it. I didn't count it, but I just feel like we got characters more fleshed out. You get to learn more about them, and it's important. But overall, I liked the season. It was definitely improvement because I did not review the last season of Baki, and I thought that was a fucking mess. Honestly, it was a fucking mess. The last fight was really fucking lame in so many levels, but at least Kengan wasn't, and we had to hold the coup, arc. I wish it was a bit more larger and, went it down a bit differently in terms of writing, because it could have like allowed us to basically side rail. Because to my understanding in the Kengan manga, the whole manga is about this tournament, and yes, there's like sequels, spin-offs, and stuff like that. But this manga is only about the tournament, and sometimes it's like really, well, not risky, but it's kind of like you kind of appreciate the variety, and I kind of like the trial arc where people kind of like participate on this tournament. That was in part 1 of season 1, and I kind of like that part about, there's the tryouts part, and there can be many different types of arcs you can do in fighting shows, and this is just focusing on the tournament as far as I know. So it was nice to see that kind of like coup arc variety there. And that's kind of like the very good thing about also the series, that it's not only about the fights, it's also about like these companies having a bit of a power struggle between them and trying to like, grasp in power and, change the director and all that type of stuff. But overall, I like this season, and we're gonna be obviously reviewing season 2, part 2, or well, will we call it season 3, or also we call it season 4, whatever. But let me know what you thought about the Kengan Ashura season 2, and I will be seeing you in the next video when it will be dropping out. Until then, see you guys later. Cheers.